Hello guys, welcome back. This is RandoGEEK. Alright guys, so I have an article for you. I'll put the link down below in the description, but it's a follow-up regarding the Dish Wireless and T-Mobile 800 megahertz situation. So last we read about this was about 2 weeks ago or so. We had an article that Dish and T-Mobile had discussed the 800 megahertz purchasing, okay, and this conversation was actually brought up during the meeting for Dish and EchoStar. They were discussing the merger. Now it was like the day before or so that they announced the merger between the two. They were questioned about whether or not they still had interest in purchasing the 800 megahertz. They said that T-Mobile and Dish were still in discussions of it. T-Mobile was still willing to sell it, and Dish was in no rush at the time. They haven't worked things out, basically, Dish said. But they pretty much left it as there was no rush for them. They'll come to terms. They'll come together, and it'll be right when the time is right. That's when the purchase would be made. So they didn't really give us anything other than that. So to me, it was just kind of, I pretty much in the video, I was not really sure whether Dish was going to act on it or not. So we have a little bit more information now. Pretty much we're seeing that Dish definitely still wants in. They definitely want to purchase the 800 megahertz, and T-Mobile certainly still wants to sell it. All right, so here's what we know according to this article. So Dish Network still wants to buy the 800 megahertz licenses from T-Mobile, but apparently it doesn't have $3.5 billion on hand to purchase it right now. We're not shocked here, okay? We already knew this. But what's interesting is Dish is asking the U.S. government to give it 10 more months to come up with the capital. So there was a filing made with the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. Dish argues that turmoil in global capital markets in the past few years have made Dish's ability to buy the licenses more onerous than anticipated. So Dish figures that 10 months is enough time to raise additional capital and obtain financing, in part because it's just announced its merger with EchoStar, and they're saying that it should put them in a more solid financial footing. So obviously, the reason Dish wants it, they want that low band coverage. The 800 megahertz spectrum transaction is part of a deal hammered out with the government to allow T-Mobile to merge with Sprint. Dish was a party to that transaction because it was set up to be the number 4th facilities-based carrier to replace Sprint, and conditions were set for it to make that happen. So one of those abilities for Dish to acquire the 800 megahertz licenses would be advantageous to Dish because of its great low-band spectrum coverage propagation characteristics. So Dish in June announced that it covers more than 70% of the U.S. population with its 5G network, but it's still got a long way to go before it's anywhere near the big 3 wireless carriers in terms of coverage. So recognizing the importance of the spectrum here is for Greenfield 5G network deployment. Dish already spent more than $1 billion to support 800 megahertz on its network. Specifically, Dish said radio's compatibility with 800 megahertz are now on more than 16,000 towers where it has deployed 5G, meaning 800 megahertz can be made available to customers immediately upon acquisition of the licenses. So Dish and T-Mobile this week filed for regulatory approval from the FCC for the transfer of the 800 megahertz licenses from T-Mobile to Dish. However, they're saying the timeline for the FCC approval is uncertain, which Dish told the court. So, among the events that Dish cites as extenuating circumstances are COVID, the war in Ukraine, the failures of large regional banks, and other macroeconomic dislocations that have led to substantial inflation that central banks in the U.S. and elsewhere have addressed by raising interest rates dramatically over the last 18 months. So there was a statement here made by Dish. This is basically what they told the court. They're saying the dramatic increase in interest rates has made it significantly more expensive for Dish to finance a purchase of the 800 megahertz spectrum licenses, rendering its ability to responsibly do so within the timeline provided by the final judgment substantially more difficult than Dish or other parties to the final judgment ever could have anticipated. In a note for investors Thursday, they're saying that analysts at New Street Research said that they assume T-Mobile opposes the extension and they don't yet have a view on whether the Department of Justice is likely to grant it, but they expect to have more insight soon. All right, so basically what we're getting here is we're seeing that Dish is still very much interested in purchasing this 800 megahertz of spectrum. However, it's what we thought. Dish simply just doesn't have the money right now. That's the stalling. That's where the stalling has been coming. Dish would have bought it a long time ago if they had that cash on hand. We know the struggles are real for Dish, but they're giving us some hope. Still showing the interest, right? They're not throwing the towel in. And secondly, the merger with EchoStar now, they have faith in that they should be able to raise some more capital. So that's very good, because prior to that, last we heard, Dish was just going to be spending absolutely nothing in order to save money to continue to build out. So now they'll still be doing that. But with the merger from EchoStar, we might see a little bit more deployments. So if they can purchase this 800 megahertz of spectrum, we might see the build out move along a little quicker. So it looks like T-Mobile still wants to get rid of it. So that's a plus. Okay, that's a plus for Dish, and that's a plus for T-Mobile, because obviously T-Mobile, they don't need it. They want to get rid of it. It's a win for both. So we're going to have to wait and see, but at least we have a little bit of an update here. 10 months. So I don't know if that's going to get approved or not. I don't know. Maybe, because the FCC sees the difficulties here for Dish, and they still have some time. So, as far as their requirements, they have until 2025 to wrap their requirements up, and cover 75%, which is what they need without getting fined. So, guess we're gonna have to wait and see, guys. Any updates, I'll be sure to report to you. But other than that, I want to thank you guys for stopping by and watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.